Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Strife's Sanctum podcast. My name is Citizen Strife, and this week I continue my run of, hey, this was freaking awesome. Let's just talk about this show with probably what was considered the best show of last half year or so, and that was Frieren, Beyond Journey's End. So, even though I would say Mao Mao alone is probably a better character by and large, and that was what sold Apothecary Diaries, Frieren is interesting because it does have your interesting characters, but it does something that a lot of shows in, say, the fantasy setting these days kind of don't do, where it's comedic, but it kind of deadpans it, where the comedy is there, and they do force the comedy sometimes, but it's always done in sort of a way that it doesn't feel like it's trying to be a comedy at the same time. I don't know how best to describe it. It's not trying to be a super serious drama, but there are tinges of that. And I believe that comes across in the first episode. But it also comes across in the way the characters talk and act. You do have some of your comic relief, but everyone in the world has spots where they themselves can be comic relief. So there's no one designated, I'm the goofy character, I'm the annoying one. Maybe like a minor character here and there. But Frieren does something special in its execution and its premise, because what it's trying to do is show you that the journey has not ended just because you beat the Demon Lord, because that is kind of the idea. You're supposed to destroy a Demon Lord. Well, what if the Demon Lord resurrects? What do you have? Kind of in the same way that Final Fantasy X would do the Calm, but then it would come back. Sin would come back, the sort of thing. Well, what if a Demon Lord resurrects and you have to destroy it again? Well, okay. Did you have a party of adventurers before you fought them? What did you learn? And then now, in modern day, what is that like? And how does that manifest? And an interesting idea is they do it through Frieren as a character. So Frieren is voiced by Mallory Rodak, who was in Space Battleship Yamato's remake in 2014, and High Elf Archer in Goblin Slayer. So Frieren is an elf, and in this world, hoity-toity elves and all that shit, but really what elves are long-lived creatures. And everything in the world is kind of dependent on mana and like magic, the magical power that you wield. Everything is like, do you have the power of mana? Demons have it, plants and animals have it to a small extent, humans have it, people develop it. It is a very nuanced thing. And Frieren has had years and years and years and years and years, because elves have a lifespan of 1,000 years. So it's played almost like she can just kind of meander and wander and not really care about things, because as long as she doesn't get killed, what does she give a shit about? So she's played it's very stoic, but at the same time, the point of view is not just her story, and it's not just the story of her current adventure with her current friends. Part of Frieren's awesomeness as a show is that a lot of the things that are happening to the current party, which I'll get to, has already been experienced by Frieren's old life, 50, 60 years earlier in Himmel, the hero's party. So you hear a bunch of stories, and it's almost like myth-making. And yet Frieren was there. So she's able to experience, old friendships or have been around people. And some races like dwarves and whatever live long too, but not like elves. So it's not even like she's played hoity-toity. It's just she just doesn't care. But she also has an inkling for knowledge that is just like mundane shit. Let me learn how to do this. How do I take a thing of magic and dry clothes? How do I take a magic scroll and learn how to cut down a tree? Weird little shit, rather than, hey, I'm using it to blow up the world, or I'm using it to make myself wealthy, or I'm using magic to do etc., etc. So Frieren has this weird relationship with people where she can kind of act as a mother figure, an idiot, a normal person, a standoffish person, and it doesn't seem out of place. But it's also like she herself is a myth, but she's real because she was part of the party that destroyed the previous demon lord. So the fact that she's still around is, oh my god, you're that person from that story. Well, it wasn't a story, it was real. So you're kind of bouncing back and forth between things that have already happened and things that are currently happening with her party. And those parties are part of the reason the show also works, because Frieren, unlike Mao Mao, doesn't have the presence of personality to carry it by herself, even though this show is going more for a dramatic approach than a comedic one. Frieren has her moments, like every time she stumbles across a magic item, she's just kind of weird, or she oversleeps, or she falls into a mimic treasure chest without fail, stupid shit like that, despite her station. That stuff's funny and all, but it's not going to carry a show. So what carries the show is both parties from the past and the future. So in the past, she was with the hero Himmel, Heiter, and Eisen. And they have their own adventures. And Himmel specifically is given kind of that role as the face of the party, despite being kind of a human, because you got two humans and you've got a dwarf, basically. But like Himmel was portrayed as somebody who doesn't have like all the power in the world, but has the ambition to be great for other people's sake. And he's willing to sacrifice his well-being and his life to go on this journey, despite all the consequences and despite all the ideas that saying, no, you can't do this, or you're not strong enough, or whatever. And it's not like he's played as a complete wuss. It's just, you're not the chosen one. You don't have the sword of legend, shit like that. She's not this King Arthur, mythic figure, but ends up being part of the party that becomes that. And in that first episode, you see them return, but then spliced in within all of this myth making and stuff, you see Himmel as an old man, and then Frieren, who looks like he hasn't aged a day. And then you see other people later on. But then it doesn't just end there. It is a backdrop of the first episode of saying the world moves on once you've done your big deed. What is your legacy once you're done? And now Himmel and the party have statues all across the world, and Frieren can travel and do all this kind of stuff. And again, you see them go on these little adventures, and sometimes these things will manifest as, oh, I've seen this before. My other party helped this village, or we found this artifact, or we did something, or there's a lesson learned. A lot of Frieren's interactions with people now have roots in the way she interacted with people before. She was trained by someone named Flom, and so I forget it. I don't think she was an elf. She was just a normal human being, but she had a distinct ability, and this is actually key to one of the things in the show midway through, is that she suppresses how strong she is. Another one of the factors at play with the magic system in the show is they're not trying to be in your face about it. Yeah, everybody has their specific power set and a certain skill that they specialize in or whatever, but they're not like complete shonen about it, where they're yelling powerful spells and shit, where it gets kind of goofy. That's why I don't watch a lot of shonen, because it's just a little like, I don't care about your power level. I really don't. The way that this show gets around it is they say how much mana you have kind of dictates how much power you have, or at least this aura that you present. And you can have like a small, like, it's kind of this wavy light surrounding you. And some people have a little bit of it, some people have a lot of it. Frieren has a massive amount of it, but she doesn't show it. So she's actually able to take people off guard. That is something that she learned from Flum. She said, learn to suppress your mana, because you never know when other people might underestimate you. Because people who drown in power flaunt it. Well, the best way to take care of that is to come across weaker than you actually are, so that when you catch them off guard, you've got them. Because what I do appreciate is, in a lot of instances, this show really comes down to catching people off guard rather than just having them just overpower people. Yeah, you can do that on occasion, but by and large, a lot of fights in this show are won by pre-planning or subterfuge, or getting the best possible shot off in the least amount of time. Catching people off guard so they make a mistake. That's sort of like high-level thinking that, separates, say, a high-level elite player from the absolute elites. The ones that have the absolute talents, but have the understanding and the mentality of like, okay, I can use something they're showing me against them and just get them. That's the cool thing about this magic system, is that everybody is at play and everybody has their own levels that they're strong and weak, but then there are people that can use that. Flom's whole existence, which has frustrated some of the people that she's been around, is that take people off guard. Make people take you for granted, and then you can kind of surprise them, because survival does not give a shit, because you might get mauled by a bear someday. You might get stabbed by a knife. You don't know. So always be aware of your surroundings and don't take anybody for granted. But also don't take your power for granted either. It's an interesting lesson. So after Flom, she joins the heroes party. She does the demon lore stuff, and again, you get these like little instances of, they learned this thing from here and do this thing. But the main party is a small party too. You get Frieren, Fern, who is voiced by Jill Harris, Nino Nakano in the quintuplets. Fern is interesting because she's actually an orphan raised by Heiter in his older years. So the 50 intervening years or whatever since the hero's party, Heiter goes off and late in his life finds Fern and decides to raise her and says, what do you want to do with the remainder of your life? And she doesn't really know what she wants to do, and she's unsure of herself. And the cool thing about this show is that it's willing to take big, like, time lapses and, jump from, a year, jump back a year, jump a couple months, do things like that. So people age on screen way faster than you think. So Frieren stops by and they actually spend years, taking care of Fern until she's of age and she actually becomes a hell of a mage in her own right. She doesn't have Frieren's, penchant for weirdness and subterfuge, but she learns kind of the values of keeping things simple, doing things the right way, and very by the book. And Fern and Frieren kind of make a great counterbalance, because Frieren is kind of whimsical and goofy on occasion, and Fern doesn't have time for that shit. And, traveling with them is just kind of weird. And then they need somebody to round out their party, and they find somebody later known as Stark. And Stark joins. He's just a guy who was told, hey, I am the hero of the whatever because I forced a dragon to run away. And it turns out he didn't really. He didn't actually fight them. But he was trained by Eisen, who was the dwarf in the hero's party. So it's not like he's some slouch. But what's nice is that Stark kind of acts again as another balancing point, a tipping point of this party. You get Frieren, you got Fern, and you have Stark. And Stark plays himself very, I wouldn't say bombastic. It's more unsure of himself, but also like unsure of his party members too. And it's like he grows to appreciate their company, but it's also like, what do I have to do, to be strong? And then it dawns on him, and it's like they trust him, maybe sometimes a little too much. And then later on, it kind of dawns on them that Fern and Stark kind of have a thing for each other. So that's kind of cute, is that they're interacting both as party members and as, boyfriend and girlfriend, for lack of a better term. And Frieren is just kind of there, just kind of like, that's fine. that's nice. It's great. But the cool thing is that all of these little things have adventures. Some of them are 2 to 3 episodes long. Some of them are half an episode, but you're doing these little journeys back and forth between Frieren's hero party, the party with Himmel in it, and Frieren's new party with Fern and Stark. And again, the idea of subterfuge and not letting people understand how strong you actually are. Fern is well on her way to being like one of the strongest people in the world because of Frieren's tutelage. And she doesn't really want it, but she also kind of does. So she doesn't force the issue, but she's just stately, more self-assured, I think, is that she knows what she wants to do. Frieren is just like, let me just create a thing that makes pickles. It's like, I made that up, but that doesn't sound out of place. She could just get a magic scroll that decides, hey, I want a pickle. There's a pickle. Fern is a little more, could we do something a little more useful with our time, please? But then it dawns on them that part of the journey and part of the understanding is enjoying the little moments. But then you have these 2 or 3 episode arcs where you're facing off against demons and you're having to fight them, and those demons can be very fucking powerful. One of the cooler parts of the show, which I don't want to spoil it per se, but it has to do with what is known as the scales of obedience, and the mechanisms at play with the demons and why they are the way they are and why Frieren is the way she is kind of coalesce. It's kind of neat. And you start learning from Flom's perspective and Frieren, and you listen to the demons, and then how they resolve that situation is so crazy. And then the second part of the episodes, because this is like Apothecary, this lasts 24 to 26 episodes. I think this actually lasted a full 28. So they had 28 episodes. The second half of this show is devoted to the northern continent and getting to it. You go to a place that has this certification exam that, what do they say, like 50 people in the world have passed. So they take it very seriously. People with the highest of standards, high level mercenaries, high level knights, high level, court magicians, people of prestige, high level priests. Even they are not first class mages, because the standard of becoming a first class mage is both ubiquitous and just insanely strict. I don't know, it feels nonsensical in a way, because it kind of is, because the person who's leading it is the person who Frieren knows, another elf, I believe it was Sayri. So it's weird, because it's like there are villains in the show, but there aren't like villains yet. You have the demons and you have the monsters of the day, but you don't have anybody that's like manipulating things in the background. And even Sayri is just kind of there as a sort of, you're annoying, you suck, sort of smarmy, smug thing. And they do these first class exams. So there's 3 different ways to do it. And the way if you survive it, because they have like 10 to 20 people signing up for this, including Fern and Frieren. So the first one, you have to, find this rare animal and capture it and keep it safe and have nobody steal it from you for an entire day. If you do that, you're fine. Then you have to do this like crazy labyrinth with doppelgangers and shit. And the final one is just talking with Sayuri, and she just looks at you and go, pass, pass, fail, pass, pass, fail. And she'll just ask them a question and be just like, what do you want? It's just weird. It's like the idea of becoming a first-class mage is basically you get the wish spell from D&D. So you could get whatever the fuck you want. Any magic spell you can think of having is yours, because she has this mountain and fountain of knowledge that she has collected and amassed over 1,000 years. And she's like, okay, what do you want? Do you want power? Do you want money? Do you want the power to create money? Do you want, stuff like that? And she sees that in people who pass, and it goes, okay, I don't know if I feel you're up to it. But then at the same time, it's just this little like back and forth between Fern, Sayuri, and Frieren, and it's just like it encapsulates the show, because it's about the characters that are in play and how they kind of just see them, who like see between the lines and read between the lines, and they just talk, and you gauge who they are, and then you learn about them. And that's the best part about it, is it's not about fancy smanchy powers and I got doom lasers, I've got this power, I can shield myself from, that's fun. That's fine and all. But what Frieren really does is it gives you that generic fantasy, but it does it in a way where the tone of the world is, we make do with what we have, and sometimes we have to bend the rules to our favor to make them count. Sometimes we have to do things that people aren't expecting so that we can survive in a situation, because it's a very like realistic kind of approach. It's not, again, the magic system and the power levels and all that shit, like they do that sort of thing, but it's kind of like minor. A lot of this show comes down to the characters, and again, that's why I would put Frieren and Mao Mao in that kind of situation, is because it's like they're the ones kind of holding their shows together. This one in a different way, because I don't think the strength of Apothecary Diaries is the court drama, the mysteries. It's Mao Mao and her interactions with people, and sometimes very disturbing interactions with people. Frieren, everybody kind of feels like they're part of this world. It's kind of like the John Wick syndrome, where you kind of know everybody's in on it, and they act the same way, and they talk the same way, and the world exists as it is. Nobody's really out of bounds. Nobody's really better or worse. Everybody just exists in that suspension of disbelief that they're in this world and they're not playing a character. Even if they're being a comic relief for a second or two, or if they're doing a stupid aside, it feels like they are lived in people, and it is ingrained in the system. And when you're able to create a show or a video game or a show or whatever, that is, everything is committed to fostering this world building or this character building concept, it works great. So would I recommend Frieren? I mean, I don't know, the most popular show of the last season, would I recommend it? I don't fucking know. Yeah, I would. But yes, I would recommend it for different reasons than probably a lot of people. I think for me, it's because I'm not looking at it from a show of, hey, I'm doing magic, oh, it's cool. I'm recommending it because it does so many things that are about magic and about people and about races, but they're doing it from a different angle. They're doing a normal fantasy show about normal fantasy things, but they're doing it from a bit of a kind of subtle, kind of almost depressing kind of manner. It's kind of a depressing comedy, or a comedy drama with like just leanings of dourness to it, where it's not trying to be funny, but it's funny in spite of itself, if that makes any sense. The characters at play and the stories that they tell are the important things. They are what draw you to the action when the action is there. And that's why I enjoyed it. So I'm hopeful we get more of it, and I know we're going to get more of it because it sold like gangbusters and was the biggest show on the planet for a good while. But that'll do it for me, and let's get going here. Next week will be Theatrhythm, Final Barline, Final Fantasy music. Yay, I love it. June 22nd, Fishing Minigames and JRPGs. That's the one I'm looking forward to quite a bit. Speed Grapher, already done the episode on it, and it's been just sitting in the can for a while. Link's Awakening, Kemono, Jihen. July 20th is going to be the Somnium Files, the Nirvana Initiative. So that's the second game in the the Somnium Files setup. July 27th will be a Sailor Moon Crystal episode with LeighClipse. So we watched Sailor Moon Crystal over the past month, and I have to say I have enjoyed it more than I thought I would. And then August 3rd, certainly by the time that episode comes out, I will have beaten, and I will talk about Persona 3 Reload, because I've done Persona 5 Royal, I've done Persona 4, I've done Soul Hackers, I think I've done SMT5. I have not done Persona 3 yet. So, perfect timing to talk about Persona, having beaten the thing. But hey, that'll be for all those next weeks. So I will see you guys next time. Citizen Strife, signing off.